This evening, I would like to discuss the introduction of handguns into Europe. The critical date for the invention of handguns is the 13th century in China. The Chinese, of course, are credited with the first use of gunpowder, and as the story goes, gunpowder was first used for fireworks. But it is certain by the 13th century, handguns were used in ancient China. This is borne out not only in representation of guns, but in also the physical guns being found. These guns are very difficult to date, so they have to be correlated with written sources. The early handguns could be made of bronze, and it is uncertain exactly what projectiles they would have fired. They could have fired pebbles or even arrows. By the time the handgun arrives in Europe, they are already distinct from weapons that would have been used in a siege. These were small weapons. The critical date is 1331, when it is recorded that German knights encountered adversaries with gunpowder weapons. These knights were, of course, mounted. So this does not suggest that the handgun has anything to do with what we would consider a handgun, in that it would be operated with one hand. It is likely they would have been operated with two hands, and in fact a third person could have been used to ignite the weapon. A good example of a handgun is here. It's very small, very short. Proportionally, it has a very large bullet. It likely would have been devastating in short ranges, but of course would be totally impractical to aim or bring down anything at a longer range. A critical point is this flash pan here that would have protected the user from being blinded by the puff of smoke or the flash from gunpowder. It's also clear it was made in a two-part mold. It was cast, and we see the seam here. As is common with many other iron implements recovered in archaeological contexts, there are not many proportionally to how many there would have been in the medieval period. By 1560, the matchlock was being used, and this would have been a technological leap above these guns. So it's likely that all of these would date before 1560, although it is possible that something like this, small, may have been manufactured not using the high technology of the day. Another example of a larger handgun is here. This is made using a very different set of methods and materials. First of all, it's relatively heavy. This would have required two hands in order to use. It may have also been mounted or used on a wall, and it is forged rather than cast. It does not have any kind of shield here, and it likely would have been lit with something like this that could have been put in a fire and put here and ignited. There are a range of these early guns that have been recovered from Germany. They have very different forms and no doubt very different functions, but they all share common features of having very short barrels and very large bullets. And I don't want to suggest at this time they were using lead bullets. They could have been using pebbles, or it could have been some other projectile that they used. I'll show a few other examples. This looks like it would clearly abut against something that would be a stock. and this would too, and you see the small flash guard right there. Perhaps the last example would be this one that is already getting longer and much thinner barrel, as if they have more confidence in what they're doing with making guns. The European tradition diverged very early from what was going on in Asia. I'd like to present one example of an Asian gun that is perhaps Ming Dynasty. As is clear, it was mounted on a pole. Proportionally, the metal was much more portable, and it was, at this time anyway, much longer. By the later Ming Dynasty, perhaps around 1600, we see things like this that were made using a variety of advanced forging techniques, and it would have launched 3 projectiles and would have been ignited individually here. It would have given the user something that perhaps would have been more shocking than deadly. However, it no doubt would have been deadly at close quarters. Thank you very much.